There's a thing that I talk about is goals are great for setting the direction of your life, but without systems in place over long term, you'll ultimately fail. And I was a perfect example of that. Want to be a millionaire before 30, and then turned into not, as far as, because I didn't have systems that allowed that repeated. And like James Clear Atomic Habits was, you default to the level of your systems. And if there's no system in place, you're no better off than anyone else.
Welcome to Monumental, everybody. I'm your host, Evan Holiday, and today on the show we have with us my Instagram buddy, my guy that I see all the time on Instagram, just crushing it, Mr. Jake Harris. Jake, how you doing, man?
I'm fantastic. I appreciate you asking that. And yeah, that's amazing how social media actually has the ability to connect people.
Yes. So Jake is doing distressed deals, distressed commercial asset deals all over the country, and is based in Sacramento and San Antonio. And before we get into Jake and his bio, and then also head into today's episode, I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing here with Monumental. It's really about creating a movement around creating massive positive impact in the communities that we work in, that we live in, and helping those around us to create value and create impact. And so we get to sit down with amazing leaders like Jake and others who are creating that impact and being leaders and making massive change in the world. I'm really excited to have Jake on. I've just been following him, and we've been connected on Instagram for a year or two, and he's just crushing it. The deals he's doing are so unique. They're so innovative, and also being able to just put life back into new projects, I think is so amazing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about Jake before we get started. He's the founder and managing partner of a private equity real estate firm that has managed, developed, and acquired more than $200 million in assets under management in the last 5 years alone. With nearly 2 decades of experience in real estate, construction, and investment management, Jake is a licensed California broker and recognized expert in opportunity zones, infill development, construction cost control systems, and the scaling of distressed investing business. He's also, most recently, the author of Catching Knives, all about commercial real estate in distressed assets. So let's just dive right into that, Jake. How did you get into distressed commercial real estate investing?
Well, so, obviously you'll have to read the book to see some of those elements, but it kind of starts out is my own distress. I was very myopically focused on becoming a millionaire before 30. And I achieved my goal and great success. And however, and really where it kind of starts picking up into the book is me sitting on a street corner down in Tucson, crying, praying to the good Lord that I could be worth no money. Having this rise and then fall, and not only this fall, but having a negative net worth, and just saying, hey, if I could start back over at zero. That's where I did. And I took some of those skill sets that I'd learned of, buying things under their value, but, over leveraged, in the subprime meltdown that caused, to really get kicked in the teeth. I realized that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Real estate, I plan on doing this for another 100, years. At 100 years old, I'll go part-time. But I'm 42 right now, so I plan 142, doing real estate. So when I look at that, this is what I wanted to do. I dove back into it, and I, started layering in, what did I do well? What did I not do well? And what kind of came out of that and was still a discovery. I know one of your questions later is like, what books made a big impact on you? Well, at that time in my life, it was Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. Like I said, I was praying that I had no money. I went to the bookstore. I'd walk to the bookstore and read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. It came out, it was about that time. For those that don't know, you should absolutely read that book. But it's
Yes,
not about
agreed.
working 4 hours. It's about 10xing and leveraging all aspects of your life.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have the money to buy the book. And so I would read in, and this is back when bookstores existed. You didn't have Amazon. And I would read through in the coffee shop, and then I put the book back and walk home. Um, and so it created that, you know, impression was how to do a little bit of everything better. And so I went back to school. I ultimately partnered up with one of my college roommates, helping work with a family office. And, they, uh, had the funding, and I was the sweat equity on, putting in the systems and the due diligence, and, putting together and buying distressed assets. And that grew. It grew, and we did that on a pretty wide scale and aggregated rental portfolios, and some that we just flipped, buying them, just being in and out to create cash flow, working and then selling them off to institutional investors. And so where I kind of leveraged that skill set was being in the trenches, figuring out, in this very distressed environment of the subprime meltdown, and then taking that, nationwide. I think I've invested in 23 states, and then, really kind of morphing and adapting that. And then that led up to the book, which just launched here a couple months ago. Was taking a lot of those lessons learned, systems that were maybe not in place that caused my own failure. There's a thing that I talk about is goals are great for setting the direction of your life, but without systems in place, over long term, you'll ultimately fail. And I was a perfect example of that. Want to be a millionaire before 30, and then turned into not, as far as, because I didn't have systems that allowed that repeated. And like James Clear, Atomic Habits was, you default to the level of your systems. And if there's no system in place, you're no better off than anyone else. And so those are some of the lessons I've learned. And I tried to put that together into this book.
I love that. I feel like we could go a lot of different directions. I want to step back to like your early stages of learning commercial real estate investing and distressed investing. So it sounds like you had that goal, you had that myopic focus of getting to a millionaire by you were 30. By the time you were 30, you met that goal. But it also sounded like there was some crash and burn after that, which led you to being like, hey, I don't want to have money. I don't want all this stress, all this pressure, because you didn't have those systems in place backing up behind the goal and allowing for a more systematic approach instead of just kind of, shoot from the hip approach.
Yeah. And I see, and maybe this is just to my own example, but obviously as I've now been doing this for 20 years now, that experiencing that up and down, and having the opportunity to talk to other investors and other people is, you don't have to learn through trial and error.
Yeah.
Leveraging other people's experiences is wisdom. I was
Yeah.
like, actually, trial and error is the worst way to learn.
Exactly.
I would much rather, and so there's a component of this book is for the younger Jake, that wasn't out there, that,
Yeah.
I was, too naive. I had, maybe I had to be hit over the head with that 2x4 to realize it. Um, but ultimately it was, um, like you said, putting those systems in place to create this level of success. And then also what, you have a game plan, like, when you want to exit. And so I referenced the Rothschilds, in the book, as far as, what happens in true wealth is built on buying low and selling before it's, too late, so to speak, because what you're doing is you're executing a game plan. And what happens is people get, fear is, and greed are drivers of human condition, is you fear you're missing out or feel like you're going to sell too soon. And so people, and in my instance, is the exact kind of situation, is that, your portfolio is going up so much every day. Like, why should we do this? We should just hold on forever. And that's where the over leveraged component and not having a game plan of when to exit and when to kind of harvest those gains, And then some of that experience was, I went to grad school for international real estate and finance, was understanding portfolio management and how institutional the Blackstones of the world operate. And it's in a much different way. Being micro correct. And I use this example is, running a construction company. I was really good at creating the best cost effective remodel that got me the highest kind of return on investment.
Right.
And I could get down, I could save you, you know, uh, you know, 25 cents a linear foot on baseboard and onto this flooring. And this one was, at $1.25 versus the $5. It looked like the $5 one. And so you translate it out and be like, well, I saved, $5,000 on this remodel on
Yeah.
this unit. Cool. Well, then what was happening is the Blackstones were coming in. Invitation Homes was the big, kind of conglomerate, or that I was kind of dealing with mostly. And they were buying properties for more than market value. And I was just like, I don't understand this. Like, let's use this example as if a property is worth $300,000 market value, to flip it or to buy it, you want to buy it at like 250,000 or less, because you're like, I got to fix it up and I got to have room
Yeah.
to,
You got to have
operate,
margin.
do those other. Well, they were coming in and they're buying it for $325,000 distressed or in the market. And you're just like, this doesn't make sense to me. And so it was like those things that were kind of like, wait, peeling back the layers of the onions of realizing that they were playing just a different game, and they were looking at previous peak prices. And so they were like, hey, previous peak prices were $500,000 a unit, and we'll pay up to 75% of that. So we can pay up to 350,000 per unit. We don't really care what market value is today, as long as we're under that kind of number. And then they were macro correct and made $7 billion. I was micro correct and I saved a few $1,000s on a remodel. And so it's like, which one do you want to
Yeah.
be? Sometimes playing bigger is actually much, much better way to think about that. And that leads to the commercial investments. And the real estate was primarily, at least who the people are, this book is so far resonating with, and the people that I'm talking to are people that are looking to get out of, they've figured out flipping or renting out or short-term rentals, but now they're looking to get into bigger deals. And because part of it is it's super hard to get scale when you're doing one house at a time.
Yeah.
And
100%.
it's, you're like, cool, I made $25,000 and I'm trying to get
Yeah.
25,000. You're like, but I have $10 million goals. And they're like, wow. So you have to get into bigger deals. And so they're looking to kind of graduate and go into commercial. And then it's kind of like they're learning a whole new thing,
Yeah.
the
It's a whole new language.
new language and cap rates and how those things, and they feel like they could make mistakes. They've had success and they're making hundreds of thousands, or some of them are millions of dollars a year on flipping houses. But then how can they translate that to commercial? And so that's where the book is resonating with them, or people that are like high net worth or a high income earners. They're making $500,000, $1 million. Like, they don't want to start doing the house. They'd like to start just doing bigger deals or
Yeah.
commercial or retail. And that's where those are the two audiences that have been receiving the message of the book quite a bit. And I can take some of my lessons learned in those elements to then create some value to them that we were discussing earlier, that wisdom to shorten the time periods that hopefully they don't have to make
Yeah.
mistakes that I did.
So I love all of it. There's a lot of knowledge that Jake just dropped. I want to kind of boil it down a little bit for our monumental listeners. First off, 1,000% agree. I think any way that you guys can turn decades into days, that should be your utmost priority, is learning from people like Jake, learning from people like myself who have done this type of deal, or whatever type of deal you want to do, or whatever business you want to do. Learn from those who have done it before and who have a track record of being massively successful in that area. Turning decades into days is powerful. And that's something I learned from my first mentors in commercial real estate. Is same thing, was like, they made tens of millions of dollars in mistakes, like 20, $30 million lost on deals. And I'm here sitting and I can say, okay, well, if I can just make $2 to $3 million worth of mistakes instead of the $20 to $30 million worth of mistakes, then I'm happy because I'm learning from their mistakes. I'm learning from their hundreds of years combined of experience that I can tap into. Where, like you're talking about with catching knives, is you can take the last 20 years of your life and boil that down into lessons and principles that can help those getting started in commercial real estate investing today. And I love that you went down that path of saying, hey, I need to learn. You got your degree in international finance. I need to find a partner that has what I don't have and has the capital, and then also go out and do the deals. And I love the micro correct versus, what do you call it, micro correct or micro?
Yeah, micro right versus macro, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
macro correct.
Yeah, I love that way of looking at things because I think we all, it helps us all to like take a step back and say, hey, I'm doing this deal for 10 units or whatever, a small multifamily deal, or I'm doing a small contract for a business or whatever it is, and saying that is helping my business today. But if I want to be playing in the big leagues and I want to be doing hundreds of millions or billions of dollars worth of deals, how do I think like the groups that are already doing that day in, day out throughout the country, throughout the world, the Blackstones, the BlackRocks? These groups are moving literally billions of dollars, buying companies, buying thousands of units at once. So that's something we talk about at Holiday Ventures, is the same thing, is like, how do we look at where the economy is going, where the assets are going that people want to buy? And that's another reason why, obviously for impact, but that's another reason why we love affordable housing, is because, it's long term, the next 10, 20 years, the demand is only going to grow and the interest from investors are only going to grow. So making, like you said, like trying to think about those macro right decisions of where is the economy going, where are, investors going, where's capital going, and that can set you up over the long run. Those, just a few decisions can really set you up for the path for success.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. Exactly that.
So when you got into distressed commercial real estate, why distressed commercial real estate, and what were some of your first deals like? What did those look like?
Well, I think it has to do with, that's not the only thing that I do. It underwrites some of my existing experience, because like you said, I do development, I do infill development, I do, some land assemblage, I do some other things. And so when I look at it, there's certain elements to real estate, and again, wanting to do this for the rest of my life, um, and I hope that that's 100+ years. Obviously, I don't have complete control over that.
I want to talk about that at some point too, by the way,
Yeah. So
longevity.
there are certain elements to that. Is um, some of my own experiences, but we do things, and depending on the life cycle and when you're investing into. So like, what you identified, markets, like we're anticipating like certain markets are going to have better growth over that. And so then we're looking at more development deals in those markets. Or like we said, I'm looking for intrinsic, discounts of that intrinsic value. I dive into a little bit, but I worked for Equity Office Properties as a contractor back in the day. And so Equity Office Properties is Sam Zell's office REIT that was the biggest office REIT in the world before Blackstone bought them out right at the 07, 08, right? The closing,
Yeah.
of everything
One
melting
of the
down.
final big deals.
Yeah, and they closed that down and wound it down. So I was working in the Bay Area and fixing up office buildings for Sam Zell's organization. I didn't know who he was. I was too young to really understand it. I then peeled back and seeing those layers, and his nickname is the grave dancer, is he was coming in and buying these distressed assets when nobody else kind of wanted them. So inherently, that's a little bit of my methodology of investing, is that I'm creating value. I'm adding and solving some kind of problem. A lot of what with you do, as well as affordable housing and development for that, is that there's a need in the market that has almost insatiable demand drivers
Right.
to that. And as long as you can kind of tap into that, either from a market dynamic, or, hey, we really like this market. So San Antonio, we have an office down there. Like, I think it's one of the most valued markets in the country because, California, the West Coast is doing a really amazing and fantastic job of driving people out of California and the West Coast. They're driving them to Texas.
Yep.
And the same thing that what New York is doing to Nashville and to
Yep.
North Carolina, the
North
Carolina.
Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they're kind of really pushing those out. And so we look at the fundamental changes in the market and driving forward. And then we're like, hey, this is a market we like and understand the future. And because really investments are about the future. The past and the history that led us up to today is good for telling a story, but it doesn't necessarily predict what's going to happen in the future. And it's those fundamentals of infrastructure spends or demand drivers or things that were not in that market before. And when there's a price discount to that, or hasn't been priced into the market, where Austin is amazing, but maybe it's already been priced in and maybe it's been overcooked. Downtown Nashville is another thing where you're just like, I'd love to do a lot more deals there, but maybe it's overcooked. It's hard for
Yeah.
that deal
Yep.
to fundamentally make sense. Now, from the distressed investing and what some of those first deals looked like was exactly what you said: buying stuff at foreclosure, buying stuff at auction or RDOs from banks that took back a bad loan, a daycare center. So there was one, a school that the guy kind of overextended, bought too many, putting together and solving a problem. We had somebody that was looking to extend their operations, take over this existing campus. They needed to have it improved, do some TI, basically had an LOI from them in hand, and then they were able to buy it out with an SBA loan, and more than double the money in 6 months, 9 months period. Flipping things like that, getting into office buildings. Sometimes the office building is a modernization is the better play. Old owners, or maybe they've inherited it, they've not invested anything into it for a very long time period, so it's the tired 1980s office decor and finishes and carpets. And I think you've probably experienced it. It smells like that. Like you just come in and you're just like, man, we
Yeah.
just open this up and bring in fiber, open up, put some glass offices, do
Yeah.
something like that. And it can create this. And that's where I look at is it's letting the market determine what we're doing with those individual assets and trying to find that highest and best use. Sometimes is converting an office building to apartments. It's a heavier lift, a heavier value add component, but there's other mechanisms that you can use. You can use maybe historic tax credits or PACE financing or, city incentives, or a combination of those that make that deal return, more, appealing to investors, or turning warehouses into housing or and that's where that kind of that infill development or the redevelopment. And I really enjoy the historic components of buildings, taking something that used to be a placemaking, like somebody, you know, met their wife there, somebody, started their first job there. They made their money to save up to buy their first house. There's so many layers to these historic buildings that you can't replicate with new development. And I'm not saying that new development is void of storytelling or connectivity. It's just you have to
Right.
work
It
a
has to
lot
have that
harder to
history.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to that point, so it really sounds like high level, your strategy and your investment goals are aligned with really finding value and also creating value, and looking at where is and what is the highest and best use for this property, for this area, for this town, for this market, and what will generate the most value and the most use from that building or that asset. And I think that's really interesting too, because also like what you're mentioning is all different types of deals. There's I think there's many different ways to go about real estate. But I think honestly, one thing that I always struggle with is like if you do all these different types of deals, how do you make sure that you are the expert at that deal? So I'd love to hear your take on like how do you deal with new types of deals, if you're doing a warehouse, if you're doing historic, if you're doing apartments, new construction, going through each of those different types of assets.
Yeah. So I think, I get that question, be like, hey, be
Yeah.
super laser focused on
Right. Right.
being the multifamily guy, and you only do that. So my response to that is I'm very, very laser focused on those markets that we operate in. And I
Yeah.
know everything about who owns it and where and how they got it and when they paid for it. And, you know, I walk up and down the streets and I can tell you the history of that building, who owned that, what family owned it, why they owned it. Grandpappy told them never to sell, and he just passed away. And so now there's an opportunity to acquire that
Yeah.
again. So like, yes, I'm very, very detailed and focused on those markets and knowing more than most anyone else. And I think that's one of the big keys is knowing more than other people is, obviously if you have a $1 billion backing and or trust fund or some of those other things, none of which I have, my only competitive advantage is taking and knowing more than others. And so when I look at this and being sometimes an outsider to some of these markets is I think people's legacy knowledge is also a disadvantage to them because they know what something historically traded for. Like there was an
Yeah.
apartment building that they're like, I sold that building for $2.5 million. It was a 60, 80 unit building. And there's just like, there's no way it could be worth $6 million now, 100,000 a unit. They're just like, that's
Yeah.
crazy. I sold it for 25,000 a unit. I go, well, that was 4, 5, 8, 10 years ago. And be like, the world's a much different world today. And I go, that's half of replacement value. That's, it's worth $200,000 a unit, if you fixed it up and put $25,000 into it. So I am not bogged down by some of that legacy knowledge. And then using the data and those demographics to say where are things actually trading for, what is the real world? And again, thinking about the future is where is this kind of going? I'm not saying speculate and, bank on, something crazy happening to make your deal make sense. And then I come in and say, hey, here's where I see this. We're buying at a discount to replacement value or the intrinsic value, and then the highest and best use. And then it causes, and what's part of with the book is that also gives you the most room for error and the margin of safety when you're buying stuff for under its replacement value or it's under its intrinsic value. And it's good for early investors to come in because you can kind of screw up a little bit and still turn out to create a profitable deal. And that comes to the catching the wave. If you see a wave emerging, like, getting in front of it, like you don't have to be Michael Phelps as far as from a swimmer to take advantage of that. The institutional investor that's maybe moving into the market, there's something that's fundamentally changing as opposed to you could actually be Michael Phelps. But if you're swimming against the tide or the current,
Yeah.
you're going to
Exactly.
get tired and swept out and crashed on the ground anyway. And that's where it's like, it's better to understand again with those macro kind of things that are happening in those markets. Now, if we buy a good deal in that market, that gives us some margins of safety to go, hey, look what happened. And I go, some of our deals, to be honest with you, we don't do much to. We just bought it right and then sold it when the market was kind of going up. And so because we
Yeah.
identified those things, we don't have to do everything value add. It helps deliver some things, but sometimes when you're just buying it for half of the value, it's like, great, we'll just sell it when it's not, when the market realizes what it's actually worth.
Right. Exactly. I love that. And as far as where, it's middle of 2021, what do you see as the future of opportunity within commercial real estate investing, and do you see more opportunities to find distressed real estate?
Yeah. So first, I thought there was going to be a lot more distress coming out of the pandemic
Yeah,
than there was.
me
Uh,
too.
they really kicked the can down the road. The Fed printed, $20 trillion and kind of threw it out the windows, and
Yeah.
it pushed the problem away. Last year, at this time, I mean, in over 2020, we had an 80% reduction on transactions in the commercial real estate space. And so far fewer deals being done. everybody was kind of getting a chance to look at every deal out there. So there was not very much of a discount to kind of market value. Now there's an inflationary pressure and issues coming up. And so people are looking to deploy capital. All that said is I do start to see opportunities coming out. I'm seeing more and more hotels being put on the market. I see retail, shopping centers, office buildings with, concerns of work from home or a 50% vacant building, and I see them coming on either the market, see if they can kind of get out of it. And so I think there's going to be more and more opportunity throughout the remainder of 2021. And I think people also want to transact before the end of the year, or try to get out of something if they maybe have some gains in there, because maybe the capital gains taxes change, or maybe the rulings on that. So I just see more and more, and maybe 18 months worth of activity getting kind of compressed into the next 6 months, being better understanding of the market, or where you want to be, or what market, what asset type is going to be helpful. I don't suggest people come into and try to do a broad spectrum of asset types when you're first starting out. You have to also understand, I've been doing this for 20 something years, and I have a broker's license. And like you said earlier, international real estate finance, like I've done a lot of things that have got me to this position. Take advantage of some of that, but don't try to do everything that I'm doing. And I translate that to some people, a good deal for them would be a terrible deal for me. Alternatively, a good deal for me may be a terrible deal for someone else, because
Right.
it's very hard to compare apples to apples in this space.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you said that. As far as where you found historically, where you found um, foreclosure deals or REO deals or other distressed opportunities, where could our listeners do that same thing?
Yeah, so that's some of the things that we help talk about in the book, as far as, and we actually give away some of that, foreclosure listing service in Texas, property radar, or you used to be foreclosure radar, Sean O'Toole and Aaron Amuchastegui with the foreclosure listing service. 10X got acquired by CoStar, which the evil empire of CoStar buying
Of
over
commercial
10X.
real estate data.
Yeah, but so one, auctions, and so a notice of default, means, say somebody's not paying their mortgage. In commercial space, there's also CMBS, there's TREP, there's some other kind of places that you can kind of monitor activity of the market, and if somebody's delinquent. Well, if somebody's delinquent, obviously something's not going right to start out with. And so that, you can kind of create a short list. People call it also driving for dollars. Like I still go drive markets. I drive up and down streets, you can kind of see, and over time you're developed like, oh, wait a minute. There's some building that looks like, the tumbleweeds are in the parking lot, there's
Yeah.
boarded up windows, there's things, there's opportunities. Doing mailers, trying to reach out to those owners, doing, searches on, tax records and who they are. If there's violations from cities or, municipalities trying to, maintain that property for them. But again, that foreclosure is the start of the process, and people are typically able to delay that out with attorneys and other things, but it can give you a clue that something's not going right, so you can start doing your due diligence. I also think 10X, those, CoStar, LoopNet, Crexi, the combination of the others are good places to be gathering information to understand what are things trading for, what are cap rates, what is rents going for, because you're going to have missing bits of information when you do a due diligence or analysis on a property, especially foreclosed property is going through the auction, because you don't get the same submittals of financials. So you need to create and craft a picture of what does this look like? What is market norms? If you can get, and it's listed on an auction site or one of those, you can get into those financials, that becomes very, very valuable information that you can archive and create. And so I pull lots of data on properties that I'm interested in that market, and maybe 6 months or a year or 2 years down the road, it comes into foreclosure, and it'd be like, I at least know what it used to be producing when it was doing a good job. I know,
Yeah.
or, and so then that's the way is like, the saying is the best time to plant a year or a tree was 20 years ago. And then
Yeah.
second best time is today. I think
Today.
for people, it's like identifying where you want to be, start doing your research. And again, I told you my kind of thing is just having more information than other people is that's my competitive advantage. Obviously, if I had billions of dollars to just throw at problems like the Tesla,
Yeah.
Elon Musk, that's a whole different thing. I'd like to experience that problem. But currently I don't have that problem of throwing billions of dollars at all my issues. And I have to come to it at the element of a leg up on knowledge. So all those sites, you can start aggregating information and data and then determining, and it's very similar. And that's why I was telling you earlier, the people that do this from a residential perspective already understand some of the mechanisms in which to be successful in commercial real estate. Now it's just connecting that to new levels and it creative ways in solving someone's problem. And there are people that have a shopping center that their dad gave to them and they're just like, I don't care about it. It's in
Yeah. I have no idea what to do with
Knoxville, I've
this.
never been there. Like,
Yeah.
if you can solve my problem and take it off my hands, I'll carry back a note. I'll do like, I mean, there's just so many amazing opportunities in real estate. And then I think that's the other thing is having that insider knowledge creates a ways to solve people's problems. Insider knowledge in the stock world is they Martha Stewart lock you up, put you in an orange jumpsuit.
Put you in jail.
Real
Yep.
estate, you're cheered like snuck in and knew
Yeah.
that
Like,
information and created an awesome deal. And now guess what?
yeah.
The Amazon, distribution center being there or new corporate campus, and you're going to have all real estate values quadruple in the next few years, but you bought it before that happened. Insider knowledge, yay, because you did.
Yeah. That is amazing. I love that example. I think you're exactly right. I mean, where else can you, knowing, having your ear to the ground of what's happening in a market and knowing what's coming. And also, like we talked about, like thinking about macro trends, like thinking about, hey, where, as far as demographics, where are we moving to? What cities are we moving to? Where are tech jobs moving to? Where are big companies relocating to? And thinking about how you can take advantage of insider information and really use that to your advantage. And like you said, like information is king, and really what you do with that information is king, and being able to take action on that and having that competitive advantage. I think that's important for everybody listening, is figuring out like what is your competitive advantage. And I think information should always be a part of that, kind of multi-pronged approach of saying, how can you find out information, or how can you find that edge that other people don't know, or are slower to figure out than you, because that can really help you find deals.
And I think we mentioned this earlier, the Instagram, the kind of things like that. Why put yourself
Yeah.
out there on Instagram or social media or other things like that? And I think obscurity is a big thing of the industry, is that we typically, you know, you get the NIMBYs. That's always a challenge. And
Yeah.
people are like, you're the big greedy bastard making money off of buying
Yep.
distressed assets, and what a terrible human being you are, and I know a lot of people in the industry that would, shy away from any publicity, any kind of press, don't put anything out there and want to go under the radar. I think we're the world's changing, and I think there's going to be a lot more information or transparency. If you're unscrupulous and you're a dirty bastard, I think the people are going to find that out faster.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think, and if that's, if you are, then maybe run a little bit in secret. But I go, even what you share or what I share, like it's not giving investors information. Like if I'm targeting and buying a deal in a market, like I'm not showing the asset that I'm, have an LOI out on,
Yeah.
I may do that 6 months or a year later once it's tied up or I'm closed on it.
Right.
But it
Exactly.
doesn't mean that I'm not sharing that and taking people along on that journey as well.
Yeah, no, I love that you brought that up because, we were talking about like obscurity is your worst enemy as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a leader. If you really want to grow your message, grow your impact, grow your success, it really, like, social media has been an amazing tool for me with Monumental, what we're doing here today, and also helping grow relationships like our relationship, and also with the audience and everybody listening. It's just amazing. Like, we've raised millions of dollars in capital. We've got deals. We're about to close a deal that's $65 million deal that came from Monumental as a connection through Monumental. That is the power of putting yourself out there, adding value, and bringing value to the world and creating a thought leadership platform.
Yeah, and I love what you do, and that's obviously connecting up, being development and reading and connecting. And so, yeah, man, it's I love what you're doing out there with the world. And here's the other little nugget that took to me. It was one of those other kind of light bulb or 2x4 over the head, or however you want to use the analogy. So let's say, because of time, the greatest invention that mankind has probably had, and usually I'll ask that question and people say, but like the wheel, let's say that that's one of the greatest inventions of mankind. And we talk about not reinventing the wheel and not doing those other things.
Yeah.
But the wheel, arguably the greatest invention of mankind, was not used as a wheel for hundreds of years. It was used as a potting wheel, and they made pottery on it until someone decided to tilt it on its side and then put it on a cart, be able to wheelbarrow and push things around so that you didn't have to carry stuff. So that's the big thing that, like, business owners don't understand. They think that I have the greatest idea or the thing that the people will find me. Like, well, that's the challenge in the world right now, is that we're inundated with
Yeah.
information, millions and billions of bits of information every single day. And it takes us like something like 35 times seeing the same bits of information before it actually even connects with us, that we recognize it. And so when you look at that from a social media platform, or, me writing this book or these other
Yeah.
things, is like people have no idea who you are, and you could be doing the greatest thing since the wheel and people still wouldn't know about it. And so it's your challenge as a business owner to put that message out there, that so you can create that bigger impact in the world beyond
Yeah.
your own head. Information is awesome, but implementation or action is really the king of all of this.
Yeah.
How many people have had the $1 million or multi-million dollar, $1 billion idea? Not very many people have that action item. And I think action solves everything. You're going to make mistakes. Nothing. And that's the other big thing, is I've talked now with lots of very, very successful people, is everyone has the imposter syndrome. Everyone thinks
Yep.
they're going to find me out at any minute. Like, they're going to pull it back and they're going to be like, there's a big hook. Somebody's going to come in and be like, Evan, you didn't know, nobody told you, but it's
Yeah.
over. You've been found out. And I feel that I have people that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars and billionaires and things like that. They still think the same thing. It's a human condition.
Yeah. Yeah, I love everything that you just said, especially the imposter syndrome, because I agree. I think we all run through that in our head. And I think one thing that I've been taught, and I always try to remind myself of, is like, nobody knows what the heck they're doing. Like, at the end of the day, we're all just taking our best guess of what is right and what is wrong, and how to take action and how to move forward and how to be successful. But at the end of the day, nobody knows exactly what's going on, or what they're doing. So it's a good reminder that, just take action, just believe in yourself, and have confidence. Um, well, Jake, I feel like we could keep going on and on for probably a couple more hours, but let's wrap up with our monumental questions. What does success mean to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many things. When you sent me that question, it was kind of one of those things. It was like, so many things mean success to me. And so, as a man that's a believer, my kids being Christians and believers is a very important thing. Us connecting in my relationship with my wife, my kids, and leaving this world a better place. I feel like I've been blessed just by being born in this country. Like, we kind of already won the lottery of life being
Yeah.
American. And I think so few people actually realize that. And so to me, success, and that's a very long way of answering this, is making this world a better place because of the blessings that have been poured into me, that I can amplify that and glorify something that is much greater and beyond my own capacity.
I love it. What about daily habits or morning rituals that you have?
So I kind of hack some of this stuff out. I work out every day. So I have now gone, I don't know what the exact number is right now, 600 something days in a row. I work out every single day. I referenced it earlier. Atomic Habits by James Clear is creating systems. And that was some of the things that were missing. So I work out every single day. I try to get 3 miles in. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, but and I also set an entire goal. I do some daily devotional. I do my Spanish lessons because my goal is to be fluent in Spanish. And so I do those Spanish lessons. I do some yerba mate tea, as well as some first of water with some mineral salt and lime juice or lemon juice in there. And then that's kind of what I start out the day. And at least if I've done those things, I've read my vivid vision, my daily devotional, my Spanish lessons, I've worked out and, had, some nutrients and some other things like that, typically before the rest of my family's got up. I feel like I've already kind of won the day. And then given when I go into work, or whenever I open my email or whatever, I'm guaranteed that there's going to be something that's going to need immediate, attention or problems that I'm going to need to solve. So at least I do that every single day. It helps me better plan out, be healthy, and position myself to help my wife and my kids. And then ultimately the follow on is my business.
I love it. Last question. What about favorite book or book you are currently reading?
So favorite book, I think for real estate is George Perez, Powerhouse Principles is my favorite real estate book. I've given it out the most to people. There's, so many amazing fundamentals. I just started Sam Walton's book recently. I liked diving into people in their business and their mindset. You mentioned earlier, leveraging people's 10, 20, 30 decades of their lives into a 3, 4, 5 hour kind of thing.
Yeah.
And leverage is by far and away. So I don't know about Sam Walton's book, but I think George Perez, Powerhouse Principles, anything you can read about real estate, Trammell Crow, Zeckendorf. There's so many real estate people that I think people have forgotten about.
Yeah, I love that, and I couldn't agree more. That George Perez book, when I read it, I was like, holy shit, that's just amazing. The transformations one can take in a very short amount of time, to be going from a planner in the city of Miami to developing basically the Miami skyline. So really powerful. I definitely recommend that book too. And Sam Walton's book, I've read that. That's a really good one. Um, Great recommendation. So in closing, first off, I'd like to say thank you, Jake. Phenomenal episode. Catching knives, distressed real estate, macro and micro decisions, and being right on the macro decisions. Learning about the team and leveraging, and I just love your philosophy. I love what you're doing, and I'm glad we get to share this with the Monumental community. So thank you, man.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And that's, one of the things, the book is catchknives.com as far as the best place to find that. And then actually, as you have some things that you can buy, we're giving away some additional items for people that helps them a dream life kind of cost analysis. I know that's, you talk about that, creating impact and other things. Is how do you actually break that down? What does your dream life
Yeah.
actually cost? Some other kind of, calculators, some due diligence checklists, some other things like that. Again, it gives people an opportunity to kind of create action in their own life. And so, they can find those as they, buy in and get some of those downloads. I think that's always very important, to help these other people, because I think that more people living in their passion, their purpose, and real estate becomes that vehicle and allows them to amplify, and money we talked about it briefly, but money's fake. But it is also an amplifier of who you really are. And I think there's a lot of, good people that want to do good things. And I think money can amplify that. And if they figure that out, how to do that with real estate, they can remove that, um, you know, hamster wheel of having to do work every single day, and they can get to a place of financial freedom that allows them to really do what is the most important and impactful thing to the world.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of that, guys, make sure you do actually take action on that, and check out Jake's book, Catching Knives, and that's at catchknives.com. Also, check Jake out on Instagram. That's where we first got connected, and he shares what he's working on, his deals. That's jake.realestate. Jake, again, phenomenal time. Loved having you on. Love what you're doing. And guys, if you enjoyed today's episode with Jake and myself, please make sure to like, subscribe, rate, review, whatever platform you're on right now listening. Please make sure to also share this with a friend or share it on social media. Tag us. Let us know you're listening. Let us know you enjoyed today's episode. And guys, with that, have a monumental day.